My name is Mark. Welcome to my channel. This is the Fly Fishing Filmmaker, and I've spent a lot of time rowing a Water Master boat. I think my first one was the Water Master Grizzly, which I've had for about 15 years. I've had the Kodiak for a couple years, and I've had the Bruin for a couple years. I do some film work for Water Master, but these opinions are my own and they don't even know I'm making this video. I'll tell you all the things that I love about these boats, which I do. I'm biased about them and I recommend them to as many people as I can. But I'll also tell you some of the downsides that I've found using them over the years, and then you can decide if the Water Master boats are right for you. Why would you choose a Water Master Kodiak?
Why?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that it's a frameless style watercraft. And this means that there is no hard frame that holds on to the pontoons. It's a circular boat and it has two chambers. It has a front chamber and a back chamber. The frameless design means that it rolls up into a much smaller package than, say, a pontoon that has hard frame that you can't really break down any smaller. This is great because you can roll it up into a backpack, you can pack it in your trunk, it's easy to store, and you can travel with it pretty easily. You can send it on an airplane and like everything is contained within that bag. You know, I think one of the things about the Water Master boats is how tough the materials are. I've had a Grizzly for over 15 years. I've gotten one hole in it that I patched, and that patch has lasted for 4 years or so. So the materials are super tough. I'm not particularly careful about it when I'm on the river. I definitely drag it up onto the shore, or I, slide it down banks and that kind of thing. Some of the areas that I try to be careful with is once I get onto, sort of any sort of concrete or asphalt, I think there's sometimes some sharp edges there that I don't want to drag it over. So at that point, I kind of try and be a little bit more careful, but any sort of natural rocks or whatever, I've taken these boats down multi-day rafting trips and hit plenty of rocks with it and bounced off rocks and slid off rocks and gotten stuck on rocks. And I have not had any issues with punctures. I think something else that if people who aren't experienced with these boats might be concerned with flies, like in the hooks hitting it. I have hit my boat with a fly, but I've never had it puncture, so flies just bounce right off of it. One of the reasons that Water Masters are great, and you could do this with a lot of different boats, but due to their light size, you don't need a boat ramp to take them into the water. So this definitely gives you an advantage over bigger boats like big rafts and big drift boats who often need a boat ramp to launch. They're so small, you can walk them down an embankment, you can get entry points into rivers and waterways that might not be possible with other style of boats. They're easy to walk with. If they're completely unloaded, the boat is balanced. There's a couple different handles that you can just stand in the middle and you can hold the handles and the whole boat balances. And if you have gear in it, then, it helps to sort of try and balance it out. So the Kodiak is super stable. It has large tubes and the front and the rear are sort of a larger diameter than the sides. It doesn't have any rocker, which means that there is more tube in the water, and the wide design makes the boat very stable. So this is a great boat for beginners who aren't comfortable rowing. There's other boats out there that may be a little bit narrower and may be more prone to tipping if you're not careful, either catching a rock sideways or whatever. But the Water Master rafts are so are just built in a way that even if you take a rock on sideways, you're not going to flip over. One of the things I like about the Water Master raft is I feel like it is at a good height to sit in from the top of the water. So I'm 5'7", I'm not particularly tall, but I find that I'm high enough that I don't sit in the water. There are certain rafts that I've seen, like the Outcast Commander, the old version, that the seat was fairly low in the water, and so if you had a splashy ride, you'd end up sitting in water or you'd sort of be wet all day long. The Kodiak sits high enough up out of the water that even if you're getting splashes, you don't tend to get wet. But it's low enough that you can actually sit in the water and move your feet along the bottom of the river and still float. So you can fish out of your boat and still move along a run without standing up or getting out of the boat. So I think two of the biggest benefits of the Kodiak is that it makes you an efficient angler and it allows you to access water that a lot of other people won't be able to access. So for example, on the efficiency side, a common scenario is that you float down to a run and you get out of the boat and you fish all the way down to the bottom. And then when you get done, you walk back up to the boat, get your boat, and float out. With the closed bow design, it allows you just to stand up. And that means that I can just fish a whole run and have the boat just sort of float around me. And then when I'm done, I just sit down and I just float off and I go to the next spot. So it saves me time having to go back up and retrieve my boat. It allows me to wade into areas that maybe I wouldn't feel comfortable without the boat. You know, for example, if I fish a seam and the gravel bar underneath it slowly dips off and gets deeper and deeper, if I'm just wading by myself, I may only wade out so far, like maybe to my knees or my thighs, where I feel like I'm safe. I have a safe retreat to get back upstream. But with the Kodiak, I feel more comfortable fishing farther down that run. And if it gets too deep for me to come back up, I just sit in the boat and float away. I think the other thing that Kodiak does is it allows you to access water that isn't readily accessible to other people. So for example, if you're out on the water, you're going to run into various types of people. You're going to run into people who wade, people who are in drift boats, people who are in big rafts. Obviously, if you're floating, you just get access to so much river. The small size of the Kodiak allows you to get into areas that maybe drift boats aren't going to be able to stop or rafts aren't going to be able to stop. I routinely like to get into certain areas where maybe it's under a set of trees, maybe there's like a little cove, maybe it's behind some wood, that bigger boats just aren't going to be able to stop. And if they do stop, they're not going to be able to actually fish it because they take up too much room. The other thing about the closed bow design and being able to just stand up and fish is that I might notice water features that other people don't. So there's some spots on the Yakima River that I really love to fish that are long sort of gravel bars that dump into some troughs. And I can just stand up in the middle and fish my way down it. And at the end, when there would be no way for me to get back to shore, I just sit back down and I just keep floating. So the Kodiak really allows me to access water that maybe I wouldn't feel comfortable wading to. I've got the whole boat sort of floating around me. I can put my arms on it and just push up and just sit back down. It allows me to stop in places that bigger boats and waders wouldn't allow me to access. And it's efficient because it allows me just to like fish and go, fish and go. So I don't have to get out of the boat, I don't have to walk back to my boat, etc. So one of the things that I like about the Kodiak is the minimalistic design. There isn't a lot of things to break on it, and there isn't a lot of things that are gonna snag and catch on your fly line. With that said, there are different attachments and accessories that you can get for it. There's a cargo net, there's accessory pouches, there's stripping aprons, there is a full bottom to the boat, so if you want to actually have a dry, closed boat so that you can put your feet down in it and not get wet, which is great for lake fishing. They have that. There's anchors, there's motor mounts, fly rod holders. So there's a lot of accessories for it, but only if you want it. I know some people really like that sort of minimalistic, bare bones style. Other people love different accessories and being able to accessorize their boat. And so I feel like the base design of the Kodiak does a great job catering to those that like the minimalistic design. There's enough accessories that for those that like to accessorize their boat. The other great thing about the Kodiak is that It does great on multi-day trips. This last year, I took a bunch of friends down the Grand Ronde River, and one of my friends took the Kodiak as his boat, and he was able to pack 5 days worth of gear, camping gear, food, and water, and then like toilet buckets. He had no problems fitting that all in his boat and keeping it strapped in and still being able to maneuver the boat. That's another thing. If you're interested in doing multi-day trips, the Kodiak is a great boat for you to take a look at. Durability and stable design works great for those sort of wilderness trips. I think these boats are great for beginners, people looking to learn to row. They are so responsive. And you get a feel for what it's like to row a bigger boat, but you get all the responsiveness of a small boat. So a lot of times when you're rowing big drift boats and stuff like that, it takes a little bit to get the boat to start moving. You have to anticipate farther. And the Kodiak and the Grizzly are super small and, you know, like little sports cars on the river. So you can just a couple little strokes and you're dodging a rock or dodging a tree or something like that. They also draw very little water, so it's great for low water rivers or, you know, small canals and stuff like that. With everything, there's pros and cons. Let's talk about some of the cons of the Kodiak. The first con, so while it can roll up into a backpack, I do find that the backpack itself is not great for actually backpacking. There's no hip straps and there's no sternum straps. So I really feel like the backpack that it comes in is great for short carries, you know, maybe a mile or two if you wanted to carry it that way. But I think that if you really wanted to carry it long distance, that you would want to find a better backpack for it. Another downside, with its minimalistic design, it doesn't come with a lot of attachment points for things like GoPros. If you look at Outcast's boat, like the Clearwater, they come with some of those Scotty mount patches and that allow you to attach things like GoPro holders and fishing rod holders and that kind of thing. Now, you could certainly put them on the Kodiak, but the boat doesn't come with those. And so I think it's kind of a balance. I think a lot of people like the minimalistic design of the Kodiak. Obviously, it keeps costs down as well and less things to break. But if you're someone that likes having, you know, a bunch of different cameras on your boat and hooked up to your boat and that kind of thing, you're gonna need to figure out some different options for that. One of the downsides to the Kodiak, because it's so well made, it's, you know, with such tough materials, is that it's not a light boat. So again, like the Kodiak is 35 to 40 pounds before oars and bag and accessories. If you are looking to backpack that up into high mountain lakes and whatever, this probably isn't the craft for you. You're probably going to want to look for something that's ultralight, that's a lot smaller, like a ultralight float tube or something like that. Another downside to the Kodiak is its price. It is a premium product. It's handmade, it's made in the United States. It's made from super tough materials, lasts you your whole lifetime, probably your kid's lifetime, but it's still a lot of money. I personally think it's worth it. That's why I bought one. That's why I use them. That's why I recommend them. But, you know, the price point for the Kodiak is probably not in everybody's wheelhouse, so, you know, that's going to be a downside for you. And I think another con of the Kodiak is the pin style oar locks. On one hand, if you are brand new, so if you're not familiar with the oar locks, the pin basically goes through the oar, and so that locks the oar in place. The great thing about this, especially for beginners, is that you don't have to think about maintaining your oar in the right position as you're taking strokes. But the bad thing about it is that you can't feather the oar, which means rotate it. Maybe you need to take a more shallow stroke and you want to feather the oar so that it doesn't bite as deep. Or if you are floating sideways and you catch a rock with a oar that's in a normal oar lock, if it hits it, there's some give and it can slide out. But with the pin style, like that pin piece is going to take the full brunt of the hit, and it's not going to move. There's a little less give there, and maybe a little less safety. Maybe sometimes you need to pull the oars in to avoid something. You can't do that. So there is some downsides to that pin style. I think the other thing too is that if you have particularly large legs, you know, big person maybe, the oars may feel a little tight as you're taking a stroke down. There are some boats that have elevated oarlocks like the Clearwater, which definitely give you a lot more height between your legs and when you're taking a stroke. In conclusion, who is this boat for? I think it's someone who's looking for super well quality made boats, something that they're gonna use their whole lifetime. The Kodiak is great for both a day trip, but it's got enough room that you can certainly take it on multi-day trips. You know, maybe you don't want a boat that takes up a lot of space and that you have to have a trailer for. So Kodiak is great. It folds up small. It can fit in a trunk of a sedan. It can fit in storage. It, you know, doesn't take up very much space when it's in storage. And, you know, somebody that, you know, appreciates handmade, US made products. Who isn't this boat for? Someone who's looking to buy something on a budget. You definitely can find these on the used market, but they hold their value really well. So, you know, you're not going to get a major deal on the used market on them. Watermaster does do sales throughout the year, so you can usually find them for 10 to 20% off. This boat isn't for somebody that's looking for like super ultralight, you know, pack it up into the mountains sort of thing. I think this isn't I think it's too heavy for that.